Welcome to the PRsonal Podcast, the podcast where we get to meet the real person behind the professional. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Kelly Smith. Kelly is designer and founder at Spelk Studio. And as always, I'm Charlotte Nichols from Harvey and Hugo. Kelly, why are you gluten-free?
Because it makes me sick, basically. I've got coeliac disease, so I'm not supposed to eat gluten.
Okay, and how did you discover that you had celiac disease?
I started passing out,
Oh
basically.
my goodness, that's serious.
So I was at work and I just started keeling over and going dizzy. So I went to the doctor. They did some blood tests and they said you've got a really severe iron deficiency, but we don't know why. So they explored a bit further and they found some antibodies in my blood that suggested celiac disease.
And were you feeling quite poorly in the run-up to that?
I was getting worse and worse as time went on.
Yeah. And I take it you'd had that all your life, but you'd just never known.
They're not really sure what causes it or why it starts. So whether you're born with it or whether you're just predisposed to it and you develop it later on in life because of some kind of trigger, but what that trigger is, they don't know.
Or maybe hormone interaction.
No idea. I was 26 and suddenly I started getting sick and dizzy.
Wow. And for people that don't know, can you explain what celiac disease is?
Essentially, it's where your immune system doesn't work properly.
Okay.
So a normal immune system will attack viruses and destroy them. That's its job. Mm-hmm. But my immune system can't tell the difference between a virus and a piece of bread.
Okay, yeah.
So if I eat a sandwich, my immune system goes, oh my God, we're being invaded, destroy it. And then it goes absolutely crazy, destroying all the bread. And at the same time, it destroys part of the intestines. And that damage is cumulative. So the more you eat gluten, the more that damage builds up.
Yeah.
And obviously, once you've got that intestinal damage, then it can't do its job of absorbing vitamins and nutrients. So you get all kinds of different illnesses coming from that.
Makes sense. Yeah, my body likes to do a bit of that as well.
Yeah.
I was never diagnosed with celiac because I had to cut out gluten because I started getting really bad, almost anaphylactic shocks when I was eating wheat, which I didn't know at the time was what it was. And so I've got this really weird thing called exercise-induced wheat anaphylaxis. So I can eat wheat and it just gives me a mild rash if I don't move and just tummy ache as well. But if I even get my heart rate just high enough on a walk, it can trigger off anaphylaxis. So it's really interesting. But obviously I didn't have that growing up. I obviously had a very mild allergy that's worn away my gut and then caused all these things. It's so interesting. But how do you feel when you're kind of going out for a meal and then you have to explain that you are gluten-free and the seriousness of it?
It's just a pain.
Yeah.
Because I can't just rock up somewhere and order a meal. I've got to ring in advance and find out what they do and what's going to be available on the night. And then when I arrive, I've got to let them know that I'm there. And sometimes the staff can't serve me. It has to be a manager who's had allergy training. And then they have to go through a full list of what you can eat. It's like a memory test. They come to the table and they give you a long list of things that you can eat and you've got to try and remember them all.
Yeah.
And that's on a good day.
That's when there is something.
Yeah, on a bad day, they're just like, there's nothing you can eat here.
Yeah. When your friends suggest somewhere, do you kind of do they run it by you first to say, is this place okay?
Depends how good of a friend they are, I suppose.
Or how much they understand.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a lot of understanding. I mean, I think some people might not even know what gluten is. Can you describe what gluten is?
It's a kind of protein that you find in cereals. So the main culprits are wheat, barley and rye. Also spelt and kamut, which you tend not to see a lot because they're an issue.
And oats as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't see those other ones so often.
Yeah.
But they can cause problems. And literally, is it the tiniest amount can trigger?
Yeah.
Yeah. And what sort of symptoms do you experience when you're having, do you call it an attack or what do you call it?
Well, this is the weird thing because I have no symptoms.
Oh, okay.
I'm what's called a silent celiac.
Right.
So basically, I eat wheat. I feel absolutely fine, but it does the intestinal damage, which accumulates.
That's almost even worse, isn't it? Because then you just end up passing out.
Yeah, well, I can be eating something that's got gluten in for months on end and I don't know because I don't get sick.
Yeah.
That's not the case for everybody. Some people with celiac will have symptoms like diarrhea and sickness. Mm-hmm. Some people will get ataxia where they are off balance and they have difficulties with coordination, or they have tremors.
Yeah.
Some people get a certain type of dermatitis, which is like rashes and blisters. Some people get mouth ulcers. Some people have infertility. And of course, any kind of vitamin deficiency that you can think of. So anemia, and then you start to get dizzy because you haven't got enough iron. Or you have a vitamin D deficiency and then your bones start to hurt and crumble. So, it can be anything.
Yeah. Really serious things you've just mentioned there in that list. Do you think it's taken as seriously as it needs to be?
I think people who don't need to understand it don't understand it because it's not part of their life.
Yeah.
They don't think about it. And I think people are more aware of allergies, but they don't necessarily know that celiac is different. And quite often I'll just tell people I'm allergic to wheat because it's easier than trying to explain the whole thing.
Yeah, it's funny because whenever I say I'm gluten-free, they do always say, are you celiac? And I'm like, no, it's a wheat allergy. It's always, how differently would they treat the preparation of food in that case?
It shouldn't be any different.
It shouldn't
really.
be.
It's just people seem to understand a wheat allergy better than celiac. I don't know, maybe it's changed now. I mean, I've been gluten-free for 20 years.
Wow,
so
20 years.
Back when I started, there was literally nothing in the shops. If you wanted a loaf of bread, you had to get it on prescription and collect it from the pharmacy.
Yeah.
And nobody knew anything about it at all.
Goodness, how did you cope?
I lost a lot of weight because I couldn't find anything to eat initially. And it was really difficult, and I stopped eating out for a long time and then gradually got to grips with different things that I could eat.
Were you kind of in education when you realised?
Yeah, I was at university at the time.
Yeah, because again, that just affects the quality of life that you can have. If if you're on a night out and you go, you're drunk and you eat something, you have to constantly worry about that.
I had to stop drinking beer, which I was really upset about at the time.
I had to stop drinking Guinness. I really loved a pint of Guinness.
Yeah.
And actually, I cried when I found out all the things that gluten was in.
Yeah, me too.
I didn't realise that. And it happened to be in loads of my favourite things. Thank goodness for potatoes is all I can say, because I pretty much live on potatoes now. But yeah, it really, obviously, there's a lot worse things in life, but just suddenly being told you can never eat that again, eat bread. I mean, and obviously there's gluten-free bread, but it's not the same.
It's not nice, no.
Yeah. So how do you manage these days? Obviously, can you get a lot of the foods that you need from the supermarkets? You don't have to have prescription.
Pretty much nowadays, yeah. You can get more or less anything you want. And even things that I used to struggle with years ago have been changed now. So, for example, sausages used to be a really hard thing to get because they would put wheat gluten in to bulk them out. Nowadays, they tend to use rice or potato or something.
Yeah, because they know there's so many allergies emerging.
I think there's a lot more awareness now, and it just makes life a lot easier.
There are, definitely. And we talked about struggle sometimes of eating out, but do you get anxious before you're eating out, or anxious before you eat something that you haven't prepared yourself?
I don't eat out very often,
right?
To be honest. I never used to worry about it because the worst that would happen is maybe I would get a little bit sick and, it would do a little bit of damage, which would eventually heal. But then a couple of years ago, I got a really big dose of gluten by accident because a waitress in a restaurant gave me the wrong cake. And I ate the whole cake. And then she came running back and said, "Oh, I've given you the wrong cake," and it was wheat. And a few weeks after that, all my muscles seized up and started to twitch. And within a couple of weeks, I couldn't walk.
Oh, my goodness.
And so I went to various different doctors. It eased off over time. I gradually recovered. But they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. They did loads of tests. And this is going on 2 years now. I've seen 3 different neurologists. I've had tests for MS. Haven't got that. I've had tests for motor neurone disease, where they put the needles in your muscles and run electric currents through to make sure all the muscles work correctly.
They really invasive.
They put a needle through your tongue and run an electric current through that.
Oh, my goodness.
Because apparently a common onset of the disease is in the throat. And I don't have that, but obviously the tests caused me a huge amount of anxiety.
I bet.
And they can't find anything wrong with me. So now what they're saying is that the 2 main guesses are either I've had a virus of some kind and my immune system's got carried away and damaged all the muscles, but I wasn't sick at the time.
So you think it is the gluten?
The other option is it's to do with that big dose of gluten.
Yeah.
And the neurologist said that gluten is one of the top 3 causes of neuropathy, which is nerve pain. So it could be related to that. And that's still ongoing now. They don't know if
2 years on?
Yeah, 2 years, the pain and muscle twitching. They don't know if it's ever going to go away, and they can't give me a definitive diagnosis.
And is it a sign of celiac disease that this can happen?
It can be, yeah. That can be one of the symptoms that you have, which is why they're saying, essentially by a process of elimination, there's nothing else wrong with you.
Yeah.
But we know you have celiac. So
it must be
yeah.
that.
They even took me in and did all the celiac tests again, including the endoscopy where they put the camera down,
had that.
which is absolutely dreadful.
Yeah, it's awful.
If you've had that.
Yeah.
Just trying to find out what's going on. And they're saying, that's our best guess. It's related to this big dose of wheat that you had.
Oh my
so now I'm really nervous about eating out in case they've made a mistake.
But they make mistakes quite a lot
Yeah.
in my experience. So many times they've brought me a plate of food and I've had to, and I always ask this question, is this gluten-free? Just because you're so used to it not being. And then they're like, sometimes it's quite disconcerting when they're like, oh, I don't know. And then I'm like, well, can you go and check, please? And then they go back and check that, actually, no, it's not, and it's just, yeah. I mean, and I get it, restaurants are busy or, it's really hard to train people, but 2 years on, you're still experiencing these symptoms after what is likely to be a slice of cake that had gluten in it. It's serious.
Yeah, it is pretty serious.
It kills people too.
Yeah, I mean, if you continue accumulating this internal damage from eating gluten, you can end up with bowel cancer in the long term. So it is quite serious.
Yeah, so does it affect your day-to-day life then?
Not really, because it's just once you know what you can eat, you just stick to that stuff.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And as long as you're gluten-free, you're perfectly healthy. You haven't got an issue. I mean, I take like vitamin supplements and things.
Yes.
Because I've possibly still got some stomach damage that will never heal.
Okay.
So I need more vitamins than a normal person would need.
That makes
generally,
sense.
it doesn't really affect me. I just don't eat certain things.
The hardest part I found was when you're getting really bad reactions, but you're not sure what to until all the tests are done, and then it takes ages to get proper tests done, and then it's just a scary time because you're just eating things, you're like just waiting for a reaction. So it is really tough. And like, what's the route forward based on all the symptoms that you're having? Is there anything that you can do?
No, there's no cure.
Okay.
So it's literally just don't eat gluten. That's
right.
it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And do you need to have regular hospital appointments to monitor it?
I go in once a year and they do some blood tests to make sure that I'm not cheating.
Yeah.
And that all the vitamin levels are fairly normal. And if they're not, they give me some more pills to keep them up. But generally that's it. I think I'm supposed to go and see a dietitian on a regular basis so she can tell me what to eat.
Okay.
But I've been doing it for 20 years. I don't think she's going to tell me anything that I don't know.
Yeah, you get used to it. There might be people listening to this podcast or watching it that perhaps have just recently been diagnosed with maybe a gluten allergy or celiac disease. What kind of tips or life hacks would you give to them?
It's not a big deal. You just stop eating gluten.
Yeah.
You think it's a big deal when you're diagnosed, you freak out. But years down the line, I can tell you it's not a massive issue. You learn what you can eat and you just stick to those things. And there is a lot more support available now. So there's stuff in the supermarket that you can buy. There are books that you can get. The Facebook groups, the Becky Excel Facebook group is fantastic. I don't know if you're in that.
I haven't. I was in another one.
People share loads of stuff.
Becky Excel.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah, I used to be in a different one. I can't remember what it was, but that was helpful.
There's
as
about
well.
50,000 people in the group and they share details on what they buy from where.
Yeah.
If you're in the northeast, there's a Eat Out Gluten-Free County Durham or Eat Out Gluten-Free Tyne and Weir, where people post pictures of different restaurants they've been to. So you can get all of this information. I mean, at the time I was diagnosed with celiac, Facebook hadn't been invented yet. That's how long ago it was.
Oh my goodness, it must have been so tough. I can't imagine. Just and tough for your parents just to figure out what they could make for you as well when you're back at home.
My parents still struggle with that.
Yeah, it's hard for older generations to get their head around. And my mom is brilliant now. She makes amazing gluten-free cakes. But at first she'd go to all the effort of making a gluten-free cake and then sprinkle Maltesers on the top. And I'm like, Mom, there's wheat in Maltesers. And she's like, oh. And then she'd think I was being fussy. I'm like, no, like I literally can't have it. So yeah, it's just...
And people say, oh, go on, just have a little bit, just this one.
Yeah.
Like it's not a choice, I'm going to get sick.
I know. And do you feel bad sometimes if someone's prepared, say, a cake, and obviously it has gluten in, and do you ever think that they'd get offended if you're saying, no, I can't have it?
I do, but what's even worse is when they've made the effort to do something gluten-free and I don't like it.
Oh, good point.
So if someone like really puts themselves out and they bring you like some coconut biscuits or something and they're like, I've made these for you.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, yum.
Because
I'll put the rest in my bag and I'll eat them later.
Oh,
you know, and I feel really guilty because they've made such an effort,
I know.
but I don't like coconut.
But that's also a thing, like gluten-free cakes and biscuits. They're getting better, but they can be very different. They're very dry. Like some of my friends, like if they've eaten something, they're like, "Is this gluten-free?" If it's dry, and I'm just like, "Yes." They can tell the difference. But when you've been in it for so long, I'm not as long as you. Probably getting close to 10 years now. It's you forget what it really tasted like, so you become more accepting. Or maybe not.
I think I eat things that are naturally gluten-free because I know the specialist gluten-free things.
That's what you're meant to do. Yeah. Because also there's a lot more chemicals in the manufactured products to try and enhance the flavour or make them more gluten-y without being gluten.
So instead of having a gluten-free biscuit, I'll just have like a piece of chocolate or something.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Always up for a bit of chocolate. And then the other tip I would just always say is just double and triple check when you serve things, when you're out.
Read the labels on everything. Because like you can look on the shelf in the supermarket, you can pick up 2 identical cans, but they're from different batches. They've been made in different factories.
And they change.
One's contaminated with gluten.
Yeah.
The one from the other factory's not.
No, that's a really good point. And you can't have any contamination. Yeah.
Or it can be things like 2 bars of chocolate. The large one is made in a factory where it gets contaminated with gluten. The small one's not, so that's fine.
That's
so
a really
like a
good
friend
point.
called me recently and said, I'm going to make a cake. Can you eat dairy milk? And I said, what size is the bar?
And they're probably thinking, oh, you're being really pedantic here.
I'm mad.
Yeah. But no, that's a really good point. It's something that, and again, you get a bit complacent in terms of checking labels because you're just like, oh, I always get this sort of thing. But then they can change the recipes at any time as well. Yeah. What's your favourite gluten-free range?
I usually eat the Warburton's cob loaf things.
Oh, yes.
They're not as bad
I quite
as
like the tiger bread one.
Yeah, they're not as bad as some of the other ones I find, but they're so expensive.
Yeah, they are. I was just saying that to someone this morning at the gym. They were just like, oh, and the price of bread's gone up so much. And I'm like, well, you want to see the price of gluten-free bread and you have no option.
It's like £3.50 for a loaf.
Yeah.
It's maybe, I don't know, 6 inches or
Exactly.
something.
Yeah.
And full of holes.
I know. Yeah, because it's so dry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's, like I say, I've had people on the podcast talk about cancer, things like that, but it can be just as serious if you continue eating gluten. But, on the whole, like you say, if you manage your diet, you can be totally normal.
It's just difficult because it's all day, every day.
Yes, you have to be vigilant.
Everywhere you go.
Yeah.
And since I started the business, it's more difficult. Because I'm going to lots more events and meetings and all of them involve food.
Yeah. And I just find you have to be more organised. It's not like if you're hungry and you're on a long drive, you can suddenly call at a petrol station and get something. Again, that's getting better.
They might not have anything.
Yeah, they might not have anything. And some days I just don't eat. Unless I've been organised and pack some fruit or a protein shake. If there's no option, then it's the best. I'd rather do that than risk eating something where I don't know.
I've done that before and then gone really dizzy and passed out and felt sick because I haven't eaten anything. So it's not necessarily any better sometimes.
No, that's true.
Stories are at the heart of the PRsonal Podcast, and we're so grateful for everyone who comes on and shares them. Stories are also at the heart of a strong PR campaign. And at Harvey and Hugo, we believe that everyone's story deserves a chance to be heard. That's why we're on a mission to give you a voice amplified through the power of story. Our stories are shared in the form of press releases, social media, content marketing, videography, photography, animation, graphic design, and podcasting. Our stories aren't just heard, they're shared, watched, clicked, but most importantly, they are felt. It's this stirring of emotions that cuts through the noise to light fires within people and activate them towards your purpose. So one question for you. Are you ready to share your story? Harvey and Hugo, your voice amplified.
But anyway, let's change the subject. So when did you realise that you had autism?
I've had certain difficulties all my life that I've never really connected with that. And then after my son was born in 2018, I noticed that he was also having some difficulties. So to begin with, he was just very clingy and he didn't sleep at all. And I know that babies are clingy and they don't sleep, but this was excessive.
Next level.
It was to the point where I had a nervous breakdown because of lack of sleep.
Oh, yeah.
I was falling asleep sitting at the wheel of the car.
Oh, it's dangerous.
And it was dangerous.
Yeah.
And then I started to take him to baby groups, and I noticed that he just wasn't smiling and making eye contact in the same way as others. He was very solemn.
Okay.
And my mother thought it wasn't an issue at all because I was exactly like that when I was a baby.
Okay.
But the more I looked into it, the more I read about it, I was thinking, he's autistic and nobody would listen to me.
Yeah.
But then I started to think, well, maybe I'm autistic as well.
Right.
Because I have the same sort of traits.
And you never considered it until you saw it in your son?
I'd never considered it before, but this was around the time when a lot of high-profile women were being diagnosed with autism. So people like Christine McGuinness and Melanie Sykes were on television saying, these are the difficulties that I have, and I have autism. And it wasn't something I'd really thought about before, because for most of the 20th century, autism required you to have some kind of intellectual disability to get a diagnosis.
Oh, okay.
You were really profoundly disabled if you had autism. So clearly someone like me didn't have that.
Right, because you always did really well at school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if anything, I was top in everything. I was hyperlexic.
Okay.
So I could, identify the alphabet at 18 months. I could read by the age of 3. And it wasn't until later that I found out that that's not a good thing. It's hyperlexia.
Oh, really?
It's one of the common symptoms of autism.
I never knew that, because if my children were doing that, I'd just think, oh, they're a genius.
So, that's what my parents thought.
Yeah. And clearly you still are, it can be used, some people, you might not like this phrase, they say it's a superpower. How do you feel about that?
I don't necessarily agree with that, because I think it minimises the fact that people have difficulties resulting from it. And I sometimes feel really bad saying that I have autism, because I know I've been diagnosed with it, but I'm looking at other people who are really profoundly disabled. They need 24/7 care.
Yeah.
And I feel bad saying, well, I have autism.
Oh, I wouldn't feel bad.
Do you know what I mean?
I can kind of see what you mean.
I feel like I'm being disingenuous.
Yeah.
And, maybe 20 or 30 years ago, what I've got would have been called Asperger's syndrome.
Right, okay.
And obviously we don't call it that anymore.
Oh, right, I didn't know that.
Because Hans Asperger was a Nazi.
Oh,
so because
right.
of that association, we don't use the phrase anymore. It's just called level 1 autism.
Okay.
But I think not having a separate description for people who don't have an intellectual disability makes it quite difficult for people to understand.
I see what you mean.
Because they look at me and they go, well, you've got a PhD and you drive a car and you run a business and you've got a husband and a child. How can you have the same condition as this other person who is profoundly disabled and non-verbal?
Okay, I understand.
And to be honest, I don't know the answer
to that. So what sort of symptoms or signs do you have of autism?
I think I have some social difficulties.
Okay.
So as a child, I struggled to mix with other children. I struggled to make friends, but I didn't know why the other children didn't want to play with me. And so I would look at what they were doing and I would copy. So I would memorize phrases that they'd said and use those phrases. And I would learn how long they made eye contact for, and then look away and then make eye contact, and then smile and, trying to figure out what they did and copy them.
Right.
And I thought, well, I'm doing the right thing. I don't understand why it doesn't work.
Okay.
But it's because for them, they were doing it naturally.
Yeah.
Whereas I was doing it consciously. It's like driving a manual car versus an automatic.
Yeah. And clearly maybe you were split second out on some things that they perhaps figured were disingenuous, even though you were just trying your best to... You take so much for granted. Like when things come naturally to you, that you had to literally observe.
Yeah, I still do that now.
You still do that now?
I'll walk down the street with the dog and I'll be rehearsing a conversation out loud that I've got to have with somebody later. And you can see people over the other side of the street like looking at me as if I'm a bit odd because I'm just having a conversation out loud. And my son will say, Mum, you're doing it again. because I'm just talking out loud.
Yeah, and it's almost like when you're rehearsing that conversation, you're not just rehearsing what words you'll use, it's like your body language, your eye contact. My goodness.
I still do it now.
So did you have to almost, before coming on this podcast, rehearse kind of how you...
Yeah, I sat and went through some of the questions you'd suggested and wrote down responses and memorised them and rehearsed them while I was walking the dog or driving the car or whatever. And I'm not saying that I sort of regurgitate that, but I know what kind of thing I would want to say.
Yeah.
And that makes it easier. So when people say to me, I don't understand how you were a lecturer if you've got autism. No, that's easy because I'm standing up at the front giving a rehearsed speech.
Okay, yeah.
That's a lot easier than talking to someone face to face and having to think about the nuances of eye contact and back and forth.
And small talk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
Small talk is something that I really don't like anyway, but I can imagine it must be so much more difficult.
I've got a list of things that I might talk to people about.
Oh, okay.
On my phone.
So you're almost more prepared than anyone really. And that's something we maybe all should do in terms of thinking about topics of conversation.
Yeah.
So interesting.
I struggle with building rapport with people, which was an issue when I was starting to apply for jobs, because it's the CV that gets you through the door, but it's the rapport that gets you the job.
Absolutely.
So what I would find is I would get interviews no problem because I had a great CV and lots of qualifications. And then I would get turned down for the job, and the feedback would be things like, you don't smile enough, you don't make eye contact.
Right.
You didn't offer to shake hands. So I'm sitting there thinking, great, I've got away without being touched because I don't like that.
Yeah, yeah.
And then they're thinking, she didn't offer to shake hands, that's not a good thing.
Yeah. And I can see how that's discrimination, but I can also see as an employer myself how, particularly in PR, you need people who are quite outgoing and like perhaps conversation comes naturally. And so I can see it's like it's difficult from both sides. You look
a lot of these were office jobs though.
Oh, okay.
So I don't really understand why that was necessarily an issue. I just think people want to hire someone who can do the job, but also someone who they want to sit and have lunch with for the next 5 years.
Okay.
You know what I mean? They want to feel that rapport with whoever they work with.
Yeah, it's almost like they want to like them as a person. It's not just about how well they can do the job.
I can understand that. You want a colleague who you like and want to spend time with. And someone said to me, you just made us feel uncomfortable.
Oh, really?
You were just really awkward and withdrawn, and you made us feel uncomfortable. And that's why we haven't hired you.
What do you say when they say that sort of thing?
All you can say is, okay, thanks.
Yeah.
But it was really upsetting because I felt like if they'd said you need more qualifications, I can do that.
Get them.
But if they're saying you don't smile enough or you're too shy or whatever, that's something that's very difficult to change.
And quite personal as well. Yeah, that's really difficult. And I guess you couldn't even say, well, I've got autism at that stage because you didn't know about it.
Hadn't been diagnosed with it at that point.
Yeah. And so tell us a little bit more about school life. It sounds like it was quite tough.
It wasn't too bad when I was at primary school because at that age, teachers tend to navigate the social world for you.
Okay.
So the teacher will say, come on, you've got to let everybody join in, play together nicely.
Yeah.
But once you go to secondary school, that's not the case.
Okay.
If someone doesn't want to be friends with you, then the teachers just let them get on with it. And in my case, what I found was that the whole school didn't want to be friends with me. And it was a much bigger school with lots more people, so that was difficult for me anyway. But especially the fact that because people were no longer compelled to socialise with me, they would just exclude me in a lot of cases. And then once you're excluded, some people think, well, that's an easy person to bully because nobody's going to stand up for them. So I'll just hit that person or kick them or spit on them or say nasty things, and nobody's going to do anything about it.
Oh my goodness.
So then you end up in that sort of situation, unfortunately.
Yeah. And has that left you with like almost lasting damage of the trauma you went through?
It has, because I mean that's decades ago, and even now if I hear a sound that sounds like the alarm that used to wake me up for school, I have a panic attack.
Oh my goodness, yeah. You don't think about things like that.
Yeah, and if I see one of the people that I went to school with, I'll literally I'll just cross the street.
Just hide.
And I'll feel panicky.
Yeah.
Oh, and this is decades later. You know, so parents who, your kid's being bullied and you send them to school,
that's the damage.
It does do lasting damage. That's what I always say to people.
I take it you did used to beg not to go to school?
Yeah, I mean, I ran away once because I didn't want to go. It wasn't a very nice time.
Did the teachers not try and help, or I suppose because you weren't diagnosed, but they should, I don't know.
I couldn't have been diagnosed at that point because we were still at a time when you had to have an intellectual disability to be diagnosed with autism. So they would never have figured out that there was anything wrong.
Do you think, like, in today's society, people would be kinder now that we're more understanding?
I would hope so.
Yeah.
It hasn't always been my experience.
Oh, okay. Still now?
Even in recent years.
Oh, really? So you still face discrimination?
I think less so. And I think people are more aware that they're not supposed to do this, but they still sometimes do, just naturally.
What, just almost isolate you?
I think if people don't feel a rapport with you, then they will just not hire you or not do business with you or not be friends with you, for example.
Yeah, I mean...
They won't be actively nasty
like
school kids would be. They'll just be like, no, that's not for me.
Yeah, maybe... I'm sure I've been guilty of this in the past. If I don't understand properly, I just thought, I haven't really got a lot in common with that person, so I'll move on and speak to someone else. But, you just don't think properly that, it could be autism, it could be something like that.
I think if everyone feels that they don't have something in common with you, that's when it starts to become
really hard. Goodness me. And how's the little boy that you've got, a young boy?
Yeah, he's 7.
How's he getting on with life at school? Is it very different now?
He was fine when he was at home with me. And the issue arose when he went to school.
Right.
And the special needs coordinator at school said, you've inadvertently created an autism-friendly environment at home because you don't like bright lights, you don't like loud noises, you don't like crowds of people. So he's never had an issue with this.
I see.
Because he doesn't experience those things in his home life.
I understand.
And it's when he's gone to school and being confronted by all of those things that he's starting to have
but obviously
difficulties.
You wouldn't do that because you just want to make their life easy and comfortable as you would for yourself. Right, so everything's a shock now he's at school.
And then when the school was saying he has autism because XYZ things, and I was saying, no, those things are perfectly normal. I do those things. And they said, have you been assessed?
Really? So it was...
And that was when I went to my GP and they put me on a very long waiting list. At the time, it was 4 years.
4 years?
Yeah,
did you wait 4 years?
No, I didn't, because they've got something called right to choose.
Okay.
So in the NHS, you can request where you want your care. So my care was supposed to be in County Durham, where there was a 4-year waiting list. But I requested to be referred in Glasgow, where there was only a 2-year waiting list.
Okay.
So I got assessed within 2 years. But waiting lists have just gone up and up. Like I said, there's a greater awareness. There are high-profile celebrities talking about now having autism. I think in Oxfordshire, the waiting list is currently 18 years.
I mean, that's a childhood.
Yeah, so if you're referred now, they reckon you'll get assessed about 2043, which is absolutely insane.
Goodness. I mean, it just shows, obviously it's great that there's awareness being raised, but the number of people who are clearly suffering or struggling to understand, need help in some way, to varying degrees. Goodness, that's really worrying.
And I think the issue is people are saying, well, why do you need to be diagnosed? There's no support available for you after you get that diagnosis, so why do you need to know?
So why did it help you when you did get diagnosed?
Yeah, it did massively. Because prior to that, I thought I was just a normal person who was really crap at loads of things. And I hated myself because I couldn't understand why I couldn't do the things that other people could. Whereas now I've got a greater understanding of why I have difficulties with certain things. And
just that understanding alone helped you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like before I was like racing with everybody else and I couldn't understand why I couldn't keep up. Whereas now I understand, like, I'm never going to win that race.
Okay.
So I can sort of just stop trying and focus on other things.
Yeah, that makes sense. But intellectually, you were winning the race and you were almost ahead of other people.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a very spiky profile. That's what the doctor called it. So I'm fantastic at some things, terrible at other things.
Yeah.
So, for example, the other week I went to Newcastle to give a guest lecture at the university. And then on the way home, the metro was cancelled. And I just absolutely had a breakdown in the street because I didn't know how to get the bus home.
Yeah.
So I'd gone from giving a master's lecture to struggling to get a bus.
Yeah, yeah. I don't have autism. I think I've got ADHD, but weirdly I can relate to that. I've always found like the simple things in life the hardest in terms of that, like getting lost and transport. And I'm not saying that I have it. And that must be annoying for you when the phrase on the spectrum, when people say, well, everyone's on the spectrum. How do you feel about that?
I think it's like saying, when you say everyone's a little bit autistic, it's like saying everyone's a little bit pregnant.
Okay.
Because pregnancy is a thing.
Yeah.
And you have different levels of pregnancy. You can be 3 months pregnant or 6 months pregnant. But ultimately, only pregnant people are pregnant.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You know, somebody else might have a big tummy, but they're not pregnant.
Yeah.
And autism's kind of the same. The autistic spectrum is a spectrum of autistic people. It's not a spectrum of everybody.
No, so you have to be on that spectrum in the first place. You have to have autism, and then it's about the level of degrees of it.
I don't think it's a great way to describe it, though, because you tend to think of a linear spectrum, like the electromagnetic spectrum, which goes from radio waves through visible light to gamma rays. Yeah. It's a straight line. And the autism spectrum's not like that. I think of it more like a mixing board. So you might have a bit more of this and a bit less of this. Yeah. Maybe you're fantastic at maths or music, but you really struggle with social situations. You know, or maybe you are, you've got a photographic memory, or you're really good at writing. But then on the other hand, you struggle with sensory things like the texture of clothes or food or whatever. Yeah, yeah. Do you struggle with those things? Not really, no. Textures aren't something that really bother me, but I don't like bright lights. Right. And I don't like loud noises. Yeah. And I struggle if someone's talking and there's background noise. So if someone's got the television on and they talk over the top of it, I can't separate the voice from the television. Okay. And I find it really hard to understand what they're saying. And sorry, if you told me, we could have maybe done something with that really bright light. Is that really bothering you? No, because I've got my glasses on. Oh, okay. Yeah, so that helps dim the light. I used to wear sunglasses a lot, and then people would say, that's rude, can you take them off? So I went to the optician and said, can you give me something intermediate so it's not as bright, but it's also socially acceptable? Yeah. Oh, bless you. That's these are really helpful in that respect. Yeah, and they look really cool. I thought you were just wearing them because you're a designer and that's, you were quite trendy. It is actually really helpful for that because it makes everything more high contrast. Okay. But it also affects the colours. Right. So I've got to take them off if I want to see the correct colours of things. Okay. And so you run your own business now. Was that a conscious choice because you struggled to get a foot on the career ladder, or did you just always want to run your own business? It wasn't something that I'd ever really thought about before, but for a while I'd been struggling with getting jobs because of what I now know as autism. And then my son had been diagnosed with autism and I need to be around a bit more for him. True, yeah. And my parents are in their 80s, so they need a bit more support from me as well. Oh, okay. And I need a level of flexibility that I can't get from a 9 to 5, just to care for those other people. Yeah. So I thought, right, I'm going to start my own business. Yeah. And, see how that goes. Oh, brilliant. And how is it going? Not too bad so far. So I've been part of the Durham City Incubator Scheme, which is for developing high growth startups. Brilliant. And that's been a fantastic thing to participate in. And they've linked me in with lots of other organisations like the North East Chamber of Commerce and so on. So things are starting to get moving now, which is great. And obviously it gives me that flexibility to look after myself and everybody else in my life as well. Yeah, that sounds a lot that you've got on because, running a business can be really hard anyway. And then caring for a little one can be, and then caring for parents and then as well as yourself. How do you juggle everything? I think a lot of us are this sandwich generation. So we've got the kids on one side needing care and we've got parents on the other side also needing care, largely because our parents are more likely to have had us late. Yeah. We are more likely to have had our kids late. So we end up having both of them to look after at the same time. Yeah. Which is quite difficult. Yeah, a lot of my friends are in that situation as well. Yeah. Touch wood, my parents are healthy. I mean, they had me young, which I'm grateful for, but I've had my children quite late. And then you don't want to be a burden on them, especially when you know how hard it is raising children. So yeah, it is a really interesting time. And what sort of hours work do you do if you're juggling around childcare and looking after your parents? Quite often my mum will sort of sit in the house while I'm at work. Oh, okay, yeah. So I'll go and pick her up, I'll make her some breakfast at the same time as doing the school run. And then she'll use my Netflix or do whatever she wants to. Sometimes she's really helpful and she does the ironing because I work from home. and I'll just work. And then maybe at lunchtime I'll take her out for some lunch or something.
Aww.
And then drop her home a bit later on.
Oh, you're amazing.
And then after I've dropped her off, I'll sometimes go and get my dad and bring him for dinner because they don't talk to each other.
Oh,
which
right.
makes life a bit more difficult because I've got to see them both separately.
Oh, goodness. Yeah, you don't think about that.
Yeah.
Oh, bless you. Have you got a really supportive partner?
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, my husband's great and he's really helpful.
Yeah.
And he goes and fixes things for them and picks them up and stuff if I need him to.
Yeah. And do you find that your autism affects running a business in any way?
I think it makes some things easier and some things more difficult.
Okay.
So I'm very, very focused. I've got sort of a one-channel mind when I'm concentrated on something. I'm very deeply concentrated on it, to the extent where when I was a child, my mother thought I was deaf because she would talk to me and I wouldn't respond at all because I was reading a book and the hearing had just switched off.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So I've got that very strong focus, but I struggle a bit with multitasking. Sometimes, and I struggle with all the other stuff that you have to do, like socializing and selling and trying to meet people and build a rapport to do business with them. That's really hard.
It's hard enough at the best of times, to be honest. So yeah, but great that you've got that focus, because I know that can sometimes hold people back, all the distractions, particularly in today's modern world with so much going on digitally. But literally, once you're working, you're working. Yeah,
I'm really, really focused on things.
Brilliant. What do you wish people understood more about autism?
That's a difficult one. I think, like I was saying about autism being not necessarily a linear spectrum, but people have different levels of, advantages and disadvantages depending on what specific difficulties they personally have.
Yeah.
And I think quite often if I say to people, I have autism, it makes them doubt my ability to do the work.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's why I don't talk about it a lot. I know that I've got it. I know how to accommodate it. I don't really tell other people about it for that reason.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That must be really frustrating.
Sometimes be off-putting.
Yeah. And frustrating that they judge you on everything because of it.
Because they can easily go and find somebody else to do business with who hasn't got autism.
Yeah.
And I don't want to give them any kind of negative impression. So I don't really talk about it a lot.
And like you had a tough time at school, do you worry for your son in the future, or do you think education is more geared up now?
I think the fact that they've identified that he's got autism is a massive step forward, because I was never identified at all. I never got any support. I think there's a difficulty with providing support because of the length of time it takes to get a diagnosis.
Yeah.
So he's been on the waiting list for 3 years now, nearly 4 years, and there's no sign of any assessment anytime soon. And until he gets that assessment, the school can't get money from the education authority to support him.
Okay.
So they're doing their best, but they're limited in what they can do. And I'm more worried as he gets older. I'm already starting to see him being excluded a little bit.
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
Because of certain things that he's not good at.
Yeah.
But hopefully I think people are more understanding, and also I'm more understanding as well. So my parents pretty much did nothing.
Yeah.
I told them I was being bullied at school, and my mum said, don't talk about it because that makes me feel upset.
What?
So yeah, I wasn't allowed to talk about it. There's nothing we can do about it, so just don't talk about it. Whereas if my son said that to me, I'd be right. We're going to move you to a different school. I'll home educate you if necessary, because I don't want him to go through that. It was dreadful.
Yeah. And I guess your mum was only responded to perhaps what she'd heard in her childhood. And it's oh goodness to hear.
Her attitude was sort of, you're legally required to go to school and there's nothing we can do about it. And if the authorities get involved, I think there was a distrust of authority.
Okay,
If the authorities get involved, then bad things are going to happen, And I think at the point where I ran away from home, the school psychologist was saying, well, one of the things we can do is take Kelly away from home and put her in a secure unit where we can support her schooling. And my mother was absolutely horrified. And she said, look, shut up about it. Otherwise, you're going to get taken away.
Goodness.
So, But I mean, it was a different time.
It was a different time, but you still went through that, and that must have been very hard. I mean, how did that make you feel?
At the time, it was terrible.
Yeah.
And I think it has had some ongoing, lasting effects.
You must have just felt like you had no one to talk to.
Yeah, pretty much. It wasn't a great time.
Oh, bless you.
But sort of things have moved on now, and I've got my family, and I've got my business and so on. I still find it really difficult to make friends with people, and I still don't really know what I'm doing wrong.
Yeah.
In a sense.
That must
and I
be
think
so
that
hard.
affects my son as well, because especially at a younger age, children play with their parents' friends' children.
Yeah, I guess.
And I haven't got that social circle to bring in their kids for him to play with. So I see him being on his own a lot, and that's difficult.
And were you like kind of aware of it when you met your husband? And does he have autism? Is he understanding of your autism?
He's very understanding. He hasn't been diagnosed with autism, but with the same kind of person.
Right.
So I don't know.
Yeah. It's so tough.
And his sister's been diagnosed with autism as well.
Right. Okay.
So, obviously he understands about that sort of thing.
Yeah. And do you think that if, when trying to make friends, say, school parents, if you said, I have autism, do you think they'd be more, welcoming, or do you think it's because they just don't understand?
I don't know. I mean, I tried to make friends with someone who moved in with a son the same age as mine nearby. And I thought I did everything right. And I approached them and said, would your son like to come and play? Can my son come round there? And I don't know exactly what I did wrong, but she sort of started avoiding me and making excuses why the kids couldn't play together.
Oh, it's heartbreaking.
And then she'd mentioned something about a friend's child having autism. And I said to her, yeah, I've got it, and I think my son has as well. And then she never spoke to me again. And I don't really understand why she didn't want to be friends with me or didn't want our kids to play together.
I don't understand that. So it almost makes it worse.
I don't know. Maybe it's just that, she had enough friends already and she didn't have
true.
time for anybody else. I'm not saying it's discrimination or anything, but I'm not quite sure what I'm doing wrong. I don't have a massive circle of friends. And the friends that I do have, to a large extent, are also neurodiverse in some way.
And how do you think the world could adapt to benefit neurodiverse people?
I think it needs to adapt to benefit anyone who's different or has a disability of some kind, not just autism, because the world is very much set up for one type of person. And it's the type of person who doesn't have any disabilities, doesn't have any allergies, who's available to work 9 to 5 in a standard office, and there's no accommodation around that. So if you've got kids and parents to care for, we don't accommodate you. If you have got a wheelchair, it's much better than some other kinds of disabilities, but in a lot of cases you're not accommodated. So lots and lots of different issues that people have that are just not accommodated. And it's about understanding that we need to change things in the sense that we need to accommodate everyone in whatever way they need to be accommodated. So maybe someone who is autistic might need to work somewhere that's not an open plan office. They might need a quiet space to retreat to. When I used to teach, I would go and sit in the cupboard because there was nowhere else to go where I could be on my own and sort of decompress.
Yeah.
And so providing things like that, providing ramps for people who need wheelchairs, providing free from food in cafes and canteens for people who need that. Just about accommodating all kinds of difficulties that people might have.
Yeah, definitely. And the world seems to be getting better at a lot of those things. But, equally, I understand, if you just look at the restaurants and free from food, it can be expensive and it's so tough to run a business at the best of times. So I do understand sometimes where it is so difficult to make everyone happy.
I know. There's such a variety of different needs among different people.
Yeah.
I think all you can do is really when someone informs you of a need, then you have to, you're legally required to accommodate that as much as you can.
Yeah.
But I think it's about being kind and doing your best for those people who have various needs.
That's it, I think. Yeah, trying to have that conversation, which I know is very difficult to have sometimes, but just being open and honest, being a little bit vulnerable sometimes, and trying to be kind and figure out how you can help. And maybe you can't help, but just trying. I think that's really important.
I think it's also a case of feeling free to talk about your needs to people, because if I don't tell people what I need, they're probably not going to guess.
Yeah, that's true. And that's why I'm always grateful for every guest, but grateful for you now for coming on the podcast. I know you were keen to come on to tell people about your experiences, because it helps just by talking. So thank you. I know this has probably been a really uncomfortable experience for you, but thank you so much, because people listening to this might be able to relate to things that you've been through, whether it's celiac disease or autism, and you'll help them just kind of feel not alone in that.
Yeah, if anyone has similar kinds of difficulties, feel free to reach out to me for a conversation.
Yeah, please, can you read out your contact details, maybe just like an email address or something that they could reach you on, if you're comfortable to do so?
Yeah, so you can probably contact me on LinkedIn. That's the
LinkedIn's
easiest
the best.
place. If you look for Kelly Smith, Spelk Studio on LinkedIn, and just drop me a message.
Yeah, we'll tag
I'm not an
in.
expert in any of this stuff. It's just
No.
personal experience, but sometimes that's helpful.
It's very helpful, just that validation almost of how they're feeling. But thank you for that. We'll tag in your socials when we share the podcast. Thanks so much, Kelly. But we're not quite finished. We've got your regular questions. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the worst, 10 being the best, how would you rate yourself at the following things? So number 1, how good looking are you?
I think before I had kids, I might have been maybe a 7 or an 8. I'm quite old now, so I'm going to say maybe 4 now.
It's quite harsh, but yeah, kids definitely affect things, don't they? I know myself. How funny are you?
I would say I'm not funny at all, but other people don't agree with that for some reason. I would rate myself as maybe a 3.
Okay. But your friends would probably say higher.
Yeah, I posted something on LinkedIn the other week, which was something about me not being funny at all. And somebody I know commented and said, this is a load of nonsense, and it's absolutely not true.
Oh. Okay, how good at cooking are you?
I am not bad at cooking because I have to make everything from scratch because I'm gluten-free.
Of course, yeah.
But so I can cook to an adequate level, maybe a 6.
Yeah.
But I'm very, very boring in what I cook.
Yeah.
I'll just do like plain boiled vegetables and I'll cook the same thing day after day.
Mm-hmm. You don't get bored of it?
No, my husband does. And he complains I'm not allowed to cook Christmas dinner because it's not exciting enough. Because he'll do like carrots with thyme and orange and all this stuff. And I would just have done boiled carrots.
Yeah, well,
so he does the special meals and I do sort of the everyday stuff.
Everyday
but nobody's
classics.
died yet, so it can't be that bad.
Well, I'd struggle to just make boiled carrots, so you're doing great. Buy my books. How good at singing are you?
I used to be in an amateur theatre group, so I'm going to say that I'm a 6, maybe. I was never the lead singer. I was always sort of in the chorus, in the background. My husband would have been like the soloist. He's got a fantastic voice. So I can sing, but not amazingly well. I'm going to say 6.
Oh, brilliant. Do you drink? And if you drink, what's your tolerance like in terms of like, I'm a lightweight, so I'd be like a 1 to a 2. Or if you're really good at drinking, higher.
I used to drink before I had my son.
Yeah.
And because I couldn't drink beer, I would drink the hard stuff like whiskey.
Okay.
And I probably had quite a high tolerance.
Yeah. Doesn't that have wheat in it though?
No, it doesn't apparently
okay,
because it's made from barley, but because it's distilled, supposedly they distill out all of the
I didn't know that.
the gluten. So the official line from the Scotch Whisky Association is that whiskey's gluten-free.
Oh, right. Excellent. Might have one tonight.
Yeah. So I used to drink whiskey a lot, but then I was pregnant for like 9.5 months.
Mm-hmm. Oh, right.
And then I breastfed for like 3 years after that.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, you've got to get up early in the morning.
Oh,
with
I know.
kids. I haven't got time to have a hangover.
I need to be productive.
Yeah, so now I'm probably like a 2.
Yeah,
maybe.
same. And I won't have a whiskey tonight. Yeah, I was joking. I try and be like really good with my drinking because, I need to be productive. And I don't love it as much as I used to. So
No, I just haven't got time.
no. How would you rate your parenting skills?
I often feel like I'm not doing a very good job. So I would say a 5, but I asked my son before I came here and he said I was a 10.
Oh, that's lovely.
So that's nice.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. And how good a friend are you?
I'm going to say 2, and it's not because I'm not a very good friend. I think it's because I struggle with making friends.
Right. Okay. But when you make them...
The friends that I've got, I don't know, because I often feel like I say the wrong thing and they just let me get away with it.
Well,
because,
me too, to be honest.
because we're friends.
I have no excuses either.
Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah, I'm going to say maybe a 3 because I'm not very good at making friends, but maybe an 8 once I've actually got some friends.
Okay. How intelligent are you?
I'm going to have to say maybe 9, because I think having a PhD puts me in the top 2% of the population intellectually. So academically, I'm probably like a 9 maybe, but in terms of street smarts, I'm probably a 1.
I have no common sense. How kind are you?
I'm very kind to animals. I'm probably less kind to people, and it's not because I'm a less kind person. It's because I struggle with the social aspect of that.
Yeah.
Like if somebody needs some help, I would struggle to approach them, even if I might want to be kind.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm going to say maybe a 5.
Okay, balance it out. And
on that one.
that's interesting. Like, do you feel that you can communicate better with animals?
Yeah, because animals don't talk.
Yeah.
And they don't judge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If we go to someone's house, I'm more likely to talk to the dog.
Yeah.
I think.
Oh, that's lovely. I like communicating with animals too. And the last one is sex. How would you rate yourself?
Oh, God.
Did you check with your husband on this one?
No, it didn't even occur to me to check with him. I'm really boring, so I'm going to say 2.
Okay.
And I think it's part of that autism thing of like wanting everything to be the same all the time forever.
Okay.
So like once I've chosen a shower gel, that is the shower gel that I buy forever.
Yeah.
And I'm never going to change. My husband says that's why we haven't got divorced, because I've picked him and that's it. I've made my choice.
Yeah.
And I stick with it. But yeah, I just like everything to be the same all the time.
Okay.
So
yeah.
I'm really boring.
Thank you so much. You've been wonderful.
Thank you for inviting me down.
Thank you.